All right, we're live for the second episode of the Atlas Horizon podcast. Tonight, I have the honor of having Mr. Eckner. What do you prefer?
Whatever, man. This,
Alex?
this is this is all informal, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I have the pleasure of having Alex on. I'm going to turn it over to him so that way he can kind of tell you guys what he's all about.
Yeah, man. No, this is really great, man. I mean, you and I unknowingly go way, way back. As I remember, what was it in 2018 when we formally met. We
Yep.
both found out we were at 113 Bravo together back in 07, 08. So it's yeah. I got mine around here somewhere. I don't know.
I got it. I had to
We're just talking
represent
about
tonight because I
I'm
know that was going to
unpacking.
go
So
out.
I've got beer steins. I've got my shadow box. My wife got me. I've got all kinds of stuff everywhere. But I was like, we found out we went way back. So it's really awesome to be here because I know you went through a lot, and you went through a lot of similar things that I went through, and there's a lot of that insight there from me, and to watch you go through what you did, and then go through your retirement, and then go through your transition, and then all of a sudden you're working at a bank, and it's like, really,
Yeah.
all right, but then all of a
Doing
sudden,
recruiting, same
all of
thing.
a sudden this idea popped up, and it was like, okay, now we're on to something. And to watch you kind of build this up, and now to be here sitting with you is awesome. I this is something near and dear to me. It hits home. It's not even close to home. It hits home. So it's awesome to be here, man. I really appreciate it, and I'm glad to be a part of it to help you further this and advance it. Advance the outreach, grow the spread of connections and contacts that you have, and hopefully somewhere this will hit somebody and they'll listen to it and it'll help them. That's the whole point, even if it's one person. So it's awesome to be here, man. So thank you.
Absolutely. I do appreciate you being on here. And when I was brainstorming this has been like a year in the making, and I'm like, I have to do this, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I had you in mind as far as what you did in the Corps, what you went through on deployment in the Corps, and then that transition process over to the civilian sector, and now what you do as a civilian. And I really think that your insight will definitely, like you say, reach some people, right? Because I only know what I know from the Corps. I only know what PTSD, anxiety, depression looks like from a combat zone, right? And you have a very unique insight on what it looks like on the home front. So hopefully, again, that's that's a goal of the entire podcast, is to be able to connect with someone out there that's like, oh, hey, I can't talk about my problems because I'm the only one that's going through this. If they hear it from you, they hear it from me, they hear it from the rest of the guests that I'll have on. Hopefully that'll kind of spark something inside of them. Like, hey, I need to reach out. I need to implement what Alex said on this podcast, because that sounds like it helps. I never thought that taking that avenue approach.
It's not only that, man. It's in all my years now, it's the hardest thing is breaking that stigma, especially as Marines.
Yeah.
Is if I reach out, if I ask for help, I'm a failure. I'm weak. And that's the stigma. That's the problem. And that's where, especially in the Marine Corps, and especially as Marines, I know it's present in all branches and all the services, but how many times through all my sessions, all my appointments, everything, do you know how many times the counselor, the therapist, the psychiatrist, whatever, they'll look at me after only 5 minutes and they'll go, fuck, you're a Marine, aren't you? And I'll go, yeah.
Sounds about right.
What gave it away? And they'll be like, and they'll just shake their heads. They'll be like, you fucking guys. They'll be like, you guys are the hardest clients. Like, you're the hardest patients. You're the most stubborn, the most difficult, the most rigid, unbending, unwilling people. And I mean, part of this is you got to step back. We got to walk all the way back to the beginning. Okay, why is that? Well, in layman's terms, it's pretty much brainwashing from day one.
Yep.
No quitting, no failing. Well, I mean, those are pretty good. Those are pretty good mantras for life to begin with. But no quitting, no failing to the point of absolute breaking point. And we carry that with us because, as corny as it sounds, and I know you agree with me, and I know you feel it too, that everyone I've ever met from every other branch, sailors, soldiers, coasties, airmen, everybody, none of them have that same attitude that we have as being a part of the military. Like, we're Marines. Like, we're not service members. We're not, this, that, the other. Like we're Marines, and we're going to be a Marine till the day we die.
Absolutely.
People talk about it and they laugh. They're like, oh, well, I was in the Army. I was a soldier. It's like, well, that's good for you. I was in the Marine Corps, but I'm still a Marine, and I will be until the day I die. It's a cult. It's absolutely 100% a cult. We all,
Absolutely.
at one point or another, drank the Kool-Aid. We all went down the rabbit hole with Alice, and for better or worse, we all at one point appeared on the other side. And what that other side looked like and that's kind of where we are now. It's that culmination of the different experiences and our different interactions, and everything we were exposed to over even if it was only, even if you were separated in boot camp on medical, like even if you were only there for 7 weeks, those 7 weeks changed you. It doesn't matter. Those first week changed you. You had something ingrained in you in those first 72, 96 hours, that first week, that all of a sudden it's just part of you. It doesn't matter how long or how short you were there, and that's one of the problems that we as Marines face. And not only does it serve us well in our time in service and our time overseas, but it creates a lot of problems after the fact.
Because absolutely, I absolutely agree with you. And it's funny you should mention the cult thing. I was actually just talking to one of my new employees, and he had no idea what the Marine Corps League was. And like, we've built enough rapport and all that stuff. And I looked at him, I was like, smiled. I was like, it's a cult. And he's like,
those guys are nuts. Those guys. So I'm part of the VFW up by me in Brookfield, and great group of guys. A lot of old timers, a lot of younger guys. But there's a Marine Corps League in Ridgefield. And I was reading through some old newspapers, and there came a situation where they were like somehow deemed in illegal possession of their rifles. Like, I don't know what happened. I have no idea.
Yeah.
They legitimately barricaded the doors, barred the windows, and told the Ridgefield police, come and take them. And like, they were ready to throw down over their, and antique M1s that they had for their color guard. Like, those guys are another level. They're crazy.
Yeah.
But
sounds about right.
Here we are.
Yeah. Marines just do Marine things. It's different. It's like you said, like, you're a Marine and nothing else can compare to that. If you were there for a week, or if you've been in for 20 years, 30 years, whatever have you, you still have that life experience. You have that life-altering experience that when you come out on the other side, you're different, right? And,
100%.
A lot of guys, I'm sure, including yourself and me, I'm fresh out of the service, right? I'm out of the service for exactly a year now. And I was like, I'm not going to be that guy, like, I'm very aware of just speaking with you and everyone else, like, on a regular basis. I was like, okay, so this is what he said he did to combat this. This is what I'm going to do. And like, 2 months into retirement, I was like, I get it. I freaking get it.
Well, it's funny too that you say that, because this is a whole other topic to talk about, but you leave the service with no tools in your box, precisely zero tools you're equipped with to be able to do anything. So it's all new. especially for you. So, I mean, I've got a very unique, situation that got me to where I am, but especially for you, you were a career guy, from when you were a young kid to now, that's all you knew was the Marine Corps.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
provided for you. It gave you your structure. It gave you your discipline. It gave you your everything, and then like that, it's gone. And they did nothing but some bullshit TAPS class to be like, oh, well, this is how to write a resume. Okay, yeah, no, but they give you nothing. And then all of a sudden you're left with like, well, wait a second. How do I deal with all of these stresses of civilian life? I've never experienced this before. I have no idea. And then that's where kind of it's like, well, who do I know? Who's around? Who can I talk to about this? Like, it took me ages to figure out exactly what resources the VA has, which for better or worse, they're there.
Yeah.
They don't all work too well, but they're there if you need them. But I didn't know about 90% of them. I had no idea.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's a sad reality that we give 4 years of our lives uninterrupted. We get what, like 20 days of pre-deployment leave and 20 days of post-deployment leave, but it's
If
like
you're lucky.
back to business. Yeah, exactly. If you're lucky. And they do us a disservice with the separations class. They call it TRS now, Transition Readiness Seminar, but it's the same thing as when you exited the Marine Corps. It's a professional resume is 4 pages long. Like me, I'm like, oh, cool, awesome, yeah, thank you, like this is gospel. I had a buddy of mine that he's been out for a while. He's a professional, like super smart guy. You wouldn't think it, like he was actually like book smart, because he was like just a crayon eater, door kicker type dude, right? I sent him my resume. I was like, hey, can you just like proofread this and make sure it's grammatically correct and all that stuff? And I would say probably like a minute later, after opening my email, he calls me. He's like, what the fuck is this? I was like, it's my resume. He's like, that's not a resume. I was like, tell me more. And
Go on.
yeah. And, I started talking to him about like what they thought us about like LinkedIn and how to structure the resume, what to add to your LinkedIn and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And he's like, dude, toss that out the window. Like, I'll like, let me guide you real quick. And a big part of the nonprofit is to help veterans, well, new veterans, find their way and navigate the VA, navigate how to write a proper resume, how to even dress for an interview, and what the STAR method is. Because unless you're in recruiting duty, you don't know what the STAR method is. A regular old veteran, 4-year guy, 6-year guy, never done a B billet, never been in like a leadership position, all that stuff. They go to their first job interview and they're using a STAR method, and you're just like, what? And you hit the nail on the head with the VA. Like the VA is so good when you know what it has to offer, right? And no one tells us. No one tells us, because they're just like, oh, hey, we'll get you hooked up with your VA counselor. That counselor will do X, Y, and Z. But that VA, nothing against them. They like, I'm a huge believer in like, when the VA, when you get hooked up with your counselor and all that stuff, you're not the only one, obviously, right? They're probably getting screamed at. They just got screamed at by some veteran that didn't get their appointment the day they wanted.
I equate it to these VA reps being public defenders in like New York City.
Yeah.
One public defender, they've got 600 case files on their desk.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's
exactly what it is.
That's a huge part of the nonprofit, is to before we actually go to the VA, let us arm you with what the VA actually has to offer, so that way when you're talking to your rep, you're not wasting your time or your rep's time. And like, hey, I need to know what the VNRE program is. It's no longer the voc rehab, because I fell into that. I called my rep. I was like, hey, I want to do voc rehab. She's like, that's not what it's called anymore. I was like, oh, cool, good to know. And one thing I didn't know about that specifically is that in some cases, especially if you're trying to change career paths like I am, like I'm going to school to become a social worker, my end goal is to get that LCSW or
Yeah.
whatever it is after my master's.
Licensed clinical social worker.
Yeah. And that's my end goal. And she's like, well, it would be better if you use the VNRE program as opposed to the GI Bill because you're trying to change career paths. We may be able to help you on the back end. If we can't, at least you still have your GI Bill so you can get your master's and get all the certs and all that stuff you need. And I was like, I wish guys that I spoke to even 2 weeks prior, I wish I could have told them that. You know?
Oh yeah. I only found out about that, so I actually used that too. And I only found out about it from my brother. And he only knew about it because of someone else who he knew that used it. You know, so I was able to take advantage of that, and holy cow, you know, I was able to really get through a couple more years of schooling, which was great. But
yeah, that's awesome. And
it's all so ambiguous. It's all just where is all of this stuff listed? Where is there a directory of all these benefits? Like, I have no idea. I left service twice. Didn't have a clue. You know, it's like, I don't know where any of this information is, and it's all just lost in the void somewhere, and we have no idea how to get it back.
No, absolutely. And I mean, since you brought it up, let's talk a little bit about your service. Let's talk about the first time around and what that was like, who you were with, what you did, and what life looked like after you got back.
Yeah, so I think like most guys, I enlisted right out of high school. I was 17 when I signed my papers. And, you know, I had specific goals in mind for when I was younger. And I look back and it's funny because it's directly reflective of just the way all this works. Like I originally wanted to do like NROTC scholarship. I wanted to go to an academy. I wanted to be an officer. I wanted to fly helicopters, all this stuff. And there was no one to help me through the process. There was no one to, you know, there were no OSOs, there were no NROTC, you know, points of contact or anything. There was no one to be found. So when I eventually did find someone, so my senior year, I went up to Albany and I ran a PFT, and I'll never forget this, man. I did 2 pull-ups and I was gassed. I did 46 crunches, done. And then I ran the 3 mile in like 33, 34 minutes. And I was like, yeah, I did it. Like, I feel good.
You're going to make it.
Like, I feel great. Holy God, I actually made it 3 miles. And the one guy, this one, you know, he was like a captain or something. He was like, all right, well, okay. You know, here we go. Come on. And he drove me back. And there was some like Gunny, I think. And he was like, well, he's like, you know, you're young. He's like, you're at the end of your junior year. You got time to improve, yada, yada. And I was like, okay, I felt good. But then the captain chimed in and he was like, no. He was like, selections are going on now for your application period. He's like, no way. I was like, oh, well,
thanks,
okay.
sir.
I'm like, you know, so I can already look back and be like, wow, if only the resources were in place to help facilitate success, then it might have been different. But anyway, so I enlisted right out of high school. I was 17, went to boot camp, turned 18 down there, did my 4 years, Iraq in 08, 09, Afghan in 9, 10. You know, we were in Karma in Iraq for that. Pretty uneventful. We the only like major happenings there is well, there were 2 things. One of our guys got shot in the ass, and it was the classic 1 bullet 4 holes. You know, like he was running out into a building, and you literally just saw that, you heard the thwap, and then you just saw the 4 little bits of mist come out. And he just and he went down. It was just 4 holes right through both his ass cheeks. But you know, one of the eye openers there though was one of the guys. I think he was with Charlie Company. I think dude was sitting in his gun turret outside their regular Iraqi police station, and it just took a rocket to the face. You know, like nobody knows where it came from. Like we couldn't figure it out. But it was like that was the gut check. Because up until then, it was just kind of like, oh, well, you know, we're here. We're doing our thing. Nothing's happening. Took a few mortars, but okay, no big deal. But then this kid just, out of the blue, we heard about it. It was like, oh, wait a second. Like, all right, we're almost done, but this is real. Like, I was 18 years old, so it was like, oh, okay, all right. So that really shaped my mindset for the next one. So we went to Afghan in 9/10, and we ended up in Marja supporting 6th Marines, and they're taken to the city and all of that, and that got heavy. Like that was, I saw some Vietnam guy today. He saw my sticker on the truck, and he was like, hey, young man. He's like, Semper Fi, bro. And I was like, dude, he's like 78, 80 years old almost. Yeah. And I was like, hey, sir, like, rah, And he was like, yeah. He's like, I was 68 to 75. I was in the shit. And I was like,
oh yep.
I was like, yeah, you were. And, so it was like, that's what it made me feel like, though, being in Afghanistan, because it was every day was, you never knew.
Yeah.
Every step, you never knew. Like, and that's how we lost our guys. We lost 2 guys in one patrol. We lost another guy on his own on another patrol. Then another guy, just randomly, sporadically. It was never in direct contact. It was, we had plenty of that, but we never took any hits in tick. We never took any hits from, direct fire. It was all anti-personnel IEDs. So it was that feeling of like, no matter where we went, any step could be it. Like, that's just it.
Yeah.
It was like, okay. And it's funny because, listening to episode 1, when you were talking about the color wheel, it's like, dude, we were beyond the black.
Oh yeah. No, absolutely.
There was black. But that was like pre-deployment, and then we were in the black hole through the deployment, because I remember very specifically, and this scares me now, but I remember very specifically, there were a couple of days where we got held up because the metal detector got some pings. And so the engineers are putting their stakes in, and they're and it got to the point like, dude, we've been here for 4.5 hours and EOD isn't here. Like, what are we doing? And so we would just we'd get a ping and we'd be like, fuck it. And we'd just stomp on it. Nothing happened. Great. Move on. It was like,
yeah.
I look back now and I'm like, I should be dead.
Yeah.
Like, the amount of times the metal detector went off and I just went, well, let me step on it, see what happens. And nothing happened. It's holy shit. So we were in the black for that, and lost, we lost guys. Don't get me wrong. It's not, it wasn't Fallujah 03. It wasn't Ramadi 04, 05. Like, it wasn't that. But one of the things I learned is just because my experiences weren't as bad as someone else's doesn't mean they're not bad for me. So, and that took me years and years and years to wrap my head around, because, you remember Steve Haban.
Oh yeah. So it's funny. For everyone listening, probably just like 2 of you. So Steve Haban, he's about to retire. I was a squad leader for 3rd Platoon, 3rd Squad, and he came in, took over my squad as I transitioned out of 1-3 and went to Maryland to do 2 years non-deployable. And I followed you guys on deployments, on your Karma deployment, your Marja deployment, because those were some of the guys, like your junior guys, or that would have been your peer group.
Well, my peer group, your juniors.
Yeah. Those were the guys I trained right before I left. Like, that was like my last impact in the Fleet Marine Force before I left. So I was still attached to you guys. I followed you guys and all that stuff. And then reading everything about Marja, and I was like, it was hard. It's hard to read that. And like I alluded to it in episode 1 about like some survivor's guilt type stuff.
Oh yeah.
And I know we all deal with it, but like that kind of hit me. I was like, what if I was there with them? Like, could I have made a different impact?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
But yeah. So once you got back from the Marja deployment, right? How did your life change as far as daily activity and what you had to put in place, if anything, to kind of slowly get you out of the black and back to whatever normal is.
Oh, we never left the black, man.
Yeah.
Never left the black. Are you
Absolutely,
kidding
yeah.
me? You know, we got back, and you know, I was a corporal by the time I got back, so I was running the mortar section. You know, when we were attached out, I'm running different sections, running squads, running this, and that's where I lived. So even on the days where, like, when we were RBE after they deployed to Korea again, when we were on the remain behind, you know, and our workday consisted of morning formation, chow, gym, noon formation, beach, evening formation, beach, bars. Like, that was our work day for like
Yeah.
5 months. And even all that, I look, you know, at the time, like, I was good. You know, I felt good. I was just living good. But I look back and I'm like, dude, I was almost blackout drunk 4 or 5 nights a week. I was sleeping around like a used mattress. You know, like,
well, you're in Hawaii, so
well, but
yeah.
that's not the point. Like, I don't
Yeah.
care where you are. That's not healthy. It's
No,
not
absolutely not.
You know, it's not good for anybody. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter who you are. So, but at the time, I was good. I felt good. I felt like I was living life, you know, which well, I was, but not in really a productive, constructive way. So I got out in 2011, came back to New York, you know, moved back in with, you know, my dad and all that, and started using the GI Bill, and it just continued. You know, I found other things to fill it with. You know, I started bartending. Then I was playing rugby, and you know, just going out with the rugby team and doing all this stuff. So it was the same behaviors filled for years and years, unaddressed. You know, nothing really caught up with me. And then I had my oldest son, and he was born in 2014, and it was about that time that my first marriage was really coming undone. And a lot of that had to do not with my behavior, but of my ex-wife's at the time. And, you know, she was alcoholic. She was, I don't know what the official thing is anymore, but it was, you know, at the time it was borderline personality, bipolar. So I don't actually know, but, you know, when I look back at those years, I see how malleable I was and how beaten down and downtrodden I was. And, you know, I did what I was told when I was told to do it, no matter how good or bad it was for me. And there was no independent thinking. There was no critical thinking. I just kind of realized that I had allowed myself to believe that I was loved in this relationship and that it was good for me and I wouldn't do any better. And so I stayed. And everything happened just short of me getting hit. I think I might have once, but I don't remember. You know, but everything happened just short of that. And it took until 2017 for me to finally, you know, put my foot down. And, you know, by then I've had my second son. So, you know, my youngest. And that's when brings me, you know, to us re-meeting. I went through the prior service program and re-enlisted back to active duty, you know, through you in your office. And that was a real realization because, you know, I'm sure you remember all this going down, but, you know, I'm sitting in the room with two tops and there's a master guns on the phone and, you know, they're all telling me, you know, there's 283,000 Marines, like we can help one out. And because I was doing divorce and going for sole custody. And, you know, I was pretty much saying like, I'm not leaving my kids.
Yep.
There first. And, you know, they sold me. You know, they did their job well and they sold me on it. I even walked out of the office one time and we're like, nope, I'm not doing it. And that's when they all got back and they were like, listen, you know, we can take care of you. We'll make sure you get orders that are, you know, good for your family and this and that. And I believed them. And, you know, you fast forward and, well, then none of it was true. You know, so that was the first real seed, not seed, but sprout of betrayal, you know, and it wasn't anything that happened in my first enlistment, but I think that event and experiencing that duplicitous behavior and that straight up betrayal by, fellow Marines. I think that is what cracked, the shell. I think that's what really start to let a lot of things out, because up until then, I was rolling through it. I'm thinking, I'm a staff sergeant. Like, they're not going to fucking lie to a staff sergeant. They're not going to fuck me over. I'm a staff NCO. Like, why? No, that's not going to happen. It happened.
Yeah.
So, as you remember, I got orders to 2-7 in 29 Palms, denied those.
Dude.
and that's when Major Olson and Sergeant Major Rowe, I put in for a hardship discharge because I was doing the custody, and I pretty much told them that life in the Marine Corps was incompatible with my family life, and I have sole custody of children, and I'm a single father now. And they both pretty much straight up looked at me and called me I'm a liar, I'm a fraudulent enlistment, and all this stuff. And the major looked at me and he was like, I'm going to do everything I can to see you burn for this. And the Sergeant Major was just kind of sitting there and he's just nodding his head. He's like, I think you're a fraud. And I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. Like 3, E8s and E9s looked me in the eye and lied to me. And now that I'm telling the truth, I'm branded the liar.
Yep.
And then, of course, I come to find out that, the entire recruiting station and Major Olson won all kinds of awards for my reenlistment, like recruiting station of the year, of the district, like whatever it was. Like he got a personal award, like all kinds of shit for my reenlistment. And it's like, wow, like they actually don't give a shit about me. Like I'm on my own. Like I am literally just a number. So much for all this brotherhood bullshit. Like they don't give a fuck. Like no one cares. No one cares about me. I'm on my own. So, so I denied a second set of orders. Of course, I was branded a liar in this. So my hardship denied, right up to the colonel, fucking nope.
Yeah.
And I remember we were at that family day. And there was the big slip and slide with all the bubbles and the soap suds. And I brought the kids up and I was just having a blast. I had so much fun that day. And, Soto was there and a few of the other guys, and we're all just having a hoot of a time. And I remember the Sergeant Major called me over, Sergeant Major Rowe, and I went up to him and I just, he was like, hey, he's like, we got your new orders. He's like, you're going to 2nd LAR. And I'm like, hey, Sergeant Major, these are my children. And I just, they were 3 and 4 at the time. And I just dumped them right in front of them. I'm like, hey, these are my kids. And, I just kind of looked at them both, him and the major. And Sergeant Major was just kind of nodding his head. And nothing else was said. And I was like, all right, good afternoon, gentlemen. Take care. And I left, denied the orders. And come to find out, this is how small of a world this is. My older brother was in 2-8 from 03 to 07, 2-8 Fox. And I'm talking to my brother, and I'm like, yeah, this fucking Sergeant Major Rowe. And he was like, wait. He was like, Sergeant Major Rowe? I'm like, yeah. He was like, huge black dude, like
yep.
could bench press a car, like shoulder press a train. And I'm like, yeah. And he was like, no way. He was like, let me see a picture of him. So I found his command photo when I sent it to him. He was like, dude, he was like, that was the company gunny of Golf 2-8 when I was there. He was like, next time you see this guy, he's like, ask him if he remembers like Captain Mingus, Gunny so-and-so, Gunny this. So I was like, all right, cool. So I went into Sergeant Major's office, after I denied the orders because he wanted to see me. And I'm like, and I say to him, I'm like, hey, Sergeant Major, like, it's a small world, but I was talking to my brother and he knows you. And he was like, what? And he was like, he was in Fox 2-8 in 03 to 07. He was like, he wanted to know if you remember Captain so-and-so and Gunny this. And, Sergeant Major just had that look in his eye. There's just that wash over him of like, holy shit. Like, whoa. And he was like, yeah, he's like, I remember this, that, and the other thing. And he goes, wait a second. He was like, Eckner. He was like, holy shit. He was like Corporal Eckner, Fox Mortars. He was like baby steroids. He was like, yeah. He was like, wow. And you could see the whole change in him. Like he went from this like hard, rigid, administrative Sergeant Major, and all of a sudden his mind flipped back to his days with the boys.
That's it.
And
Right there.
from then on to at least the sergeant major, I was a totally different guy. He was a totally different guy, rather, towards me.
Yeah.
And he actually ended up apologizing to me. He was like, listen, he's like, staff sergeant, he's like, after seeing you with your kids, and he's like, and just talking with you and hearing about what you're about, he was like, I'm sorry. He's like, you're doing the right thing. He was like, I'm sorry I ever went against you. He was like, I know it's too late for me to do anything now, but he's like, just know, and that meant a lot, that really did. But, too little, too late, doesn't matter, But the real kicker is I was going through the separation. I'm on leave. That prick Captain Edwards is calling me on leave.
Don't get me started with that.
Sergeant, I need you to do this. I need you to. And I'm like, I'm on leave, sir. And I just hung up the phone. I don't know how my leave ever got approved. As I was getting kicked out, they fucking let me go on 2 weeks leave. All right. But I went out to Groton and I did my separation stuff and got the x-rays, got the scans, did all my interviews, and I'm talking with the shrink, the psych doc, the Navy psych doc out there. And it was really intense, so it went through from my childhood and then went all the way down in detail of everything I've been through. And that was hard. But she looked at my paperwork and she was like, okay, Staff Sergeant, hold on. And she picked up the phone and she called the command. And she got Major Olson on the phone. And the next thing I know, she's like, what the fuck are you doing, sir? She was like, you're trying to bad conduct discharge this Marine who has this diagnosis, boom, 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 boom. She's like, do you want to see yourself in a court martial? She's like, because that's where you're headed with what you're trying to do to this Marine. And I'm just sitting there like, whoa. And then, the next day, the paperwork came through general under honorable conditions. They got their little fuck you in there to me with the RE4, but whatever. Yeah. And then just like that, it was over again, So it's just everything was gone. The structure was gone, the schedule was gone, the predictability, all of it was gone. And there I was in my father's house with my 2 kids on my own, just trying to figure it out. And that was hard, It was I worked at a fucking Starbucks for minimum wage. I went back to bartending, but that kind of led me into where I am now. And I somehow found myself in EMT course, became a Connecticut EMT, started working at some little private ambulance company, which was ungodly miserable. But then as things would have it, the local hospital ended up buying the company. So I got absorbed into the hospital and they were a different sort of service. And then so I'm working there. And then one of the supervisors was like, hey, it's like, Alex, it's like, why aren't you in paramedic school? And I was like, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
And I was like, ooh, that doesn't sound like something I want to do. But I looked into it. And by then I had been more than fortunate enough to meet my now current wife. Nurse. She's a nurse at the hospital. We met and, she ended up moving in and she was my entire foundation through all of that. I mean, if you don't know anything about paramedic school, that was probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I'm sitting in this classroom with all these kids, they're all like, they're kids and they're complaining, they're doing this and, whatever. And I'm like, listen, I've been to war twice and I'll go back before I do paramedic school again. Like, you are out of your mind. It's, so I found myself as a paramedic now here in Danbury in Connecticut. And, I've been a licensed medic now for a year and a half, about a year and a half. And, I'll tell you what, it's a hard job, but I absolutely love it. And it brings with it, all its own stresses and all its own horrible, but also wonderful experiences. I mean, where else can you sit in like a 6x8 box with a little 80-year-old woman and by yourself and just flirt with her and just make her feel like she is the only person in the world and not get a sexual assault charge for it.
That's one way of putting it.
No, but it's a lot of fun because you get to look at these people and you get to actually be. My wife just knocked on the window as I was saying that, and she's like, what the fuck? But my point is, and that's like a real embellished thing, but the point is though, is it's like I went from the one extreme of being in the Marine Corps and doing these things and out to ruin things and out to destroy everything, to now it's the polar opposite. Like, I don't care professionally. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you've done. I don't care where you come from or anything. I'm going to do everything I can to make your day a little better professionally. Now, don't mind you, there are patients that I'm simply legally obligated to take care of. That if I had a choice, I'd leave them. But but it's been a ride. It's been really, really interesting. It's been hard, and like I said, like I was so fortunate to have met that woman, because without her, I wouldn't be where I am. It's like she helped facilitate in me the beginning of that healing process, which, it's only started 4 years ago, and my combat experiences ended in 2011, but it was in 2019 that I actually began, well, maybe later than that, probably 21, that I actually started to heal and realized, wow, if I don't do something, this isn't going to end well. So it's hard, because you talk about, the resources, and you talk about the environments, and you talk about all the stuff, and you wanted to ask what life was like from military experiences, like traumatic experiences. I mean, that's the stuff that keeps me up at night. That's the stuff that weighs on me. And there have been a lot of things that have happened to me as a paramedic. Like I see some pretty gnarly stuff, like stuff no one should see. And it's akin to the military. But, I actually, in my last session with my counselor, I came to the conclusion that, like, you know what, though? Being ridden with post-traumatic stress and suffering, because that's what it is, it's suffering from all of those symptoms and those experiences, have actually allowed me to thrive as a paramedic.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which I never expected, like my hypervigilance, when I'm walking through the projects of Danbury, my hypervigilance serves me well. I'm seeing everything. I'm hearing everything. I'm noticing everyone, because that's a real risk. I'm a white guy in a uniform, and I go walking through the projects of some of these towns. There are a lot of people who don't want to see me there, even though I'm a paramedic and not a cop. Yeah. They don't differentiate a lot of the times. So it's served me really well. And that desensitization that we've all been through from combat now allows me to look at some of the things I have to do at work and function, and just, okay, there's a body squished like ground beef in a car. That's not something anyone should see. And I look at it and go,
Yep.
Okay, I guess I'll go to work now. And it just doesn't faze you. It just doesn't. So it's tough, because there are things that should really set me back. There are things that I do at work that should be like, for most people, would make them stop in their tracks. But, unfortunately, I went through what I went through in Afghanistan and Iraq. And now here I'm able to just kind of coast on through and just kind of see the things and go, oh, well, that's new. Oh, I've never seen that before. Oh, I've seen that before. And, just roll through and just do my job. So it's a really, really interesting dynamic. It's not one I ever thought I would experience or even realize I'm experiencing. But it's really helped. It's really, really helped, So
Yeah.
for a lot of guys who separate, they don't have that.
Yeah.
I found myself in a career which is filled with veterans, filled with them. And it's the same environment. Well, it used to be the same environment. We got a lot of the sensitive types now, rolling in,
Yeah.
and I'll say something and I'll see my supervisor just kind of give me that look, and it's like, oh, okay.
Whoops.
All right. But we got a lot of Marines, a lot of former Army guys, and we're able to just fuck off, and we're able to just banter just like we used to do, back with the boys, and that's helped.
That's a beautiful thing. That's awesome.
I found, excuse me, and a lot of guys find that in the police department. They find it in the fire department. These are all the types of jobs that require this type of mentality. And when we find each other, it's like you've known each other for years and years and years. And you always try to one up each other, and you're always shit talking, and you're always doing this and the other thing. So that made the transition a lot easier. That made it, but it's still the civilian world. Things are still different. You can't, I can't look at some of these people walk by the hall and just, hey, motherfucker. Like, it doesn't, doesn't fly anymore. Sometimes it does, but you gotta know your audience.
Yeah. So your outlook on what you experience as a paramedic after all your combat experience, how it's kind of desensitized you, but in a good way, right? Because there's a lot of guys that I talk to that, firefighters, cops. I think you're like the only paramedic I know. Weird. But they've all kind of said it across the board that it just hits differently because it's a home front. It's home. It's your perspective is very unique, and I'm glad you were honest about it and all that stuff, because you know what, again, this is all about reaching out to someone that's like, man, I'm so like, what is wrong with me? Like, I'm so desensitized, blah blah blah, whatever. And they're like, oh no, I'm not the only one.
Well, don't get me wrong though, like, it's problematic in every other aspect of my life.
Yeah.
And I would say that in speaking with a lot of other firefighters, police officers and things, it's different for them because their job is very different. A lot of cops, whether they're state, local, municipal, doesn't matter. Like, they're doing traffic stops, and they're doing road jobs, and they're babysitting construction sites, and, they're working in the schools, and, they're dealing with drunks, they're dealing with druggies and the domestics and things like that. So I guarantee you, if you went and you talked to a lot of these cops and were like, well, hey, how does seeing some of these domestics hit you? It's like, I bet you most of them would be like, it doesn't. Like, guy beating his wife beating her guy. Like, for them, it's just like, it's another day.
Yeah.
But whereas for me, being a paramedic, being on the ambulance every day, I'm in the middle of someone's worst day of their life. I'm in the middle of a family tragedy. I'm in the middle of a catastrophic accident, something, maybe not all of them, but something every single day. So when we talk about, like, how many firemen can walk up on, on some poor old woman who's just getting her chest caved in, and, just routinely be okay with that. I mean, I'm sure there are plenty, but
yeah,
at the same point, it's like, that's what I do. I deal with these, like, the one thing I will say is I'm very, very fortunate to have not experienced is, because, like, I don't know how this would affect me, but anything with kids. I haven't had anything really serious with kids yet. The longer I do this, the more likely it becomes.
Yeah.
And I know it's getting close, because just a couple of weeks ago, I was going to pick up a shift, and I'm like, oh, look, this one's open. I'll, 8 hours easy overtime.
Yeah.
it turned out on that shift, that ambulance that I would have been on ended up going to a 2-year-old, no, an 18 month or an 8-month. Might have been an 8-month-old or 18. I don't remember. Drowned at the bottom of the pool. So I don't know how I would have dealt with that one. Maybe I would have business as usual. I don't know. And then maybe after the fact, I would have fucking cried. I got nothing.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that it's like I worked a 19-year-old one morning. It was New Year's Day. It was New Year's Day. A 19-year-old in his apartment, probably got drunk, Bob Marley styled, threw up in his sleep, and choked on all his vomit. And I worked him, and I did everything, and everybody afterwards was like, "Hey man, you okay?" And I looked at him, I'm like, "Yeah." Like, why wouldn't I be? And my one buddy was like, "Well, that was a kid," and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm good." Yeah. And I haven't thought about it since. It's just kind of like, yeah. It's like, yeah, I was 19. Oh shit, that's a good point. He was young. Well, he's dead. Oh well, and I just on I go. But I'm not foolish enough anymore to realize that, yeah, I'm desensitized at work, and I'm pretty insensitive, and I don't really give a shit about a lot of things. But when I come home, that's a problem, and it bleeds through. And we touched on this, but I actually just finished my official regimen of the CPT, the cognitive processing therapy, and it stupefied me as to the way I was thinking about myself and about the world. And don't get me wrong, the government will give its own people diseases just to see what happens, and they'll napalm complexes of women and children who are non-compliant with the fucking ATF. I've got no illusions there, but when I was down in DC with my wife and the kids, and all I could think about was which one of these people is going to start shooting. Like, who's left a suitcase and walked away from it? Who's done this? And it's like, all right, I clearly have a skewed view. And you were talking about the homework, and I hated the homework.
Yep.
All these goddamn worksheets. There's this one. What was it called? I know I got them. Where are they? The challenging beliefs worksheets. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Here it is. Here it is.
Oh boy.
This guy.
Oh yeah, that one. That thing's a freaking nightmare.
Hate it.
Yeah.
But
and it's like, how dare you, paper, call me out like that? Like, you're a piece of fucking paper.
I am offended.
Yeah.
Like, fuck you. But with that being said, though, as I sat intentionally, I mean, I must have, I think officially maybe only done 5 or 6 of them. Like, actually sat down and wrote out and actually did it. But it made it so clear to me how disproportionate my mindset was and how toxic my thought process was to myself. And to be able to sit there and write through this and do what you have to do, and then come out the other end and realize, well, I'm still angry, but where in the beginning I was 90% angry. I've worked through all of this, and I've answered these questions, and I've done this. I'm only like 50% angry now. And it was amazing that the more I did it, the more subconscious it became. And when I had these thoughts or these beliefs, whatever it was, like, I would just start subconsciously rolling through this worksheet on my own. And I'd be able to talk myself down from wherever I was. And I'd be able to actually walk away going, all right, I'm not as bad as I thought I was. I'm okay. And the whole point was to change that thought process, to manipulate your toxic train of thought, because that's what it is. That's what post-traumatic stress is. Yeah. It's the disproportionate views about yourself and the situation and the world. And it's about addressing the event, not things that have happened since. Don't get me wrong, a lot of things have happened to me since that, really didn't help.
Oh yeah.
but it's about the event. So when my therapist looked at me and she goes, well, what caused the event? And in the very beginning, it was very cut and dry. It was I told him to go here and he died. It's my fault. Done. That was the end of it. And I couldn't get past it. I told him to go into that building. And when he did, he died. It's my fault. If I hadn't told him to, he wouldn't have died. And that's how linear my thinking was. That I put all the blame on myself. I had that survivor's guilt. I was the guy for the longest time that would get pissed off at people for enjoying Memorial Day, for having a barbecue and having some beers. You know what I mean? I'd be pissed off about it. What the fuck are you doing? This isn't a holiday. This is not a happy day. Go fuck yourselves.
Yeah.
My buddies are dead and I fucking killed them. And that's where I was at. And then so, in this recent session, we were able to talk about all right, so what caused the event? And and she just asked me, and I was like, God damn you.
How dare you?
But I was able to, start from, instead of being because of 3 centuries worth of religious hatred, blah, 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 New World Order and this and that, because that's all up here somewhere. I was able to step back and be like, well, we were in this area. We were tasked with this mission to accomplish this objective. And based off of those circumstances alone, we made a decision with the training that I had received that was tactically sound and the most appropriate decision to be made strategically. So I made the choice, as I think if I go back, I would have made every time.
Yeah. No.
Because that's what we were trained to do. So she's like, okay. She's like, so is it really your fault that you told him to go in? I'm like, well, yeah, but no, because I made that choice with all of the relevant information I had. And all of that relevant information told me, this is what you need to do. So I did it. And once I did that, once I said, hey, take your machine gun and your ammo man, go into that building, get up top, set up overwatch and support by fire. And this motherfucker, I'll never forget this. He's got this thing, it's fucking 240 on his shoulder. He's like, all right, man, let's check it out. And I'm like fucking hell, dude. All right, man. And, so he goes over there. And so I've been able now to get myself past that, right? So it's not my fault. It's kind of my fault, but it's not my fault. But now I'm at the point where well, our SOPs were to have an engineer clear the building first. And for whatever reason that day, between all of us, all the team leaders and the squad leader and the lieutenant, nobody did it.
Yeah.
Engineer wasn't there. So, Pierre, Lance Corporal type, takes that first step in. I'm overseeing now my 60s gun crew. I got another machine gun team I'm worried about. I got my rocket somewhere else, right? So I'm doing all that, and just fucking the earth shook. And the dust and the rocks, I fucking went down. I'm all, stars and days, oh my God. And, I just see body parts through the air, man. And it's like, what just happened? And so and of course, then, fucking all hell opens up. Machine guns start coming in towards us, all kinds of shit. We're like, whoa. So, we went on, did what we do, man. Fucking close with and engage, right?
Yep.
While guys are over there lobbing 203s, fucking Haban comes on the radio. He's like, Hector, he's like, start hitting it with the 60s. You're cleared hot. I'm like, fuck yeah.
All right. That shit.
So we're in handheld, dude. You get this shit though. And this sits with me. This sits with me heavy. So I was in handheld. I had just lined up ranged it out because I had the vector and everything. I flipped it over to drop, and I have the HE round. I'm in the muzzle. I'm about to let go of that round, and just as I start loosening my grip, fucking dust off over my head.
Ooh.
Like
Okay.
whatever the British dust off were. They weren't dust off, but whatever the hell they were. I forget. But oh my God. And I pulled the round out, and I was just like, I was shaking. I was like, if I had just let that go, that timing was it. Like that bird would have been down. And I was shaking, and I like it's with me. Cause I'm like, I was this close to bringing down an entire medevac crew. Like, oh my God. But, as we talk through it and we go through it and we go through it over and over and over and over, it's like, I have no control over what this poor bastard Afghan was doing. Like, this guy was going to put a bomb there. It didn't fucking matter. And if I didn't tell my machine gunner to go in there, somebody else would have, and they'd be dead. Like, someone was dying that day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So no matter how many times I go through it again and again and again and again, it's like something bad was always going to happen. And it just so happened that I was the one who initiated the sequence by saying, take that building. Let's get in there, So that's what I live with, man. And, I will say for anybody who's in a similar boat, it's like the CPT, as much of a pain in the ass as it was, it really helped. It really helped me reframe my mind. My wife bought me the shadow box for Christmas.
Uh-huh.
And I opened it up, man, and I just cried. And for whatever reason, that was like I just started CPT. And then all of a sudden, I was pulling out pictures, and I'm hanging up the flag, and I got my citation in from that day. And all of a sudden, I'm starting to put all my things up, and I was like, okay, that was the first step. And that forced me to stop avoiding it. Because, and I'm sure and I'm sure so does just about everybody going through this, the more you avoid it, worse it gets.
Yep.
So once I stopped avoiding it, man, once I started actually putting things up, and I started seeing this stuff every day, and for the first however many weeks, like every time I looked at that one of those photos behind me, just the heart would start going, and the breathing, and I'd start shaking, but it passed, and I remembered I'm not there. Like, I'm home, I'm safe. I've got a wife who I adore and admire and would do anything for, and I have 2 kids who I absolutely love, and it's like I'm okay. These things happen to me, and there's no changing that. Like, there's no changing what it did to me. But I can get myself to a place where I can live. I can be okay. And so I found myself Memorial Day this year. I was with the VFW. I marched in the parade. The boys were in the back of a deuce and a half throwing candy during the parade, loving life.
Nice.
And we spent the rest of the day fishing with my wife and having a barbecue. And, it felt good. It felt really, really good. And that's the first time in years and years and years. So it's just, it kind of comes back. It's like, it's just knowing, where do you start? Who do you call?
You know what? And
who do you find?
It's so important that you just said that. Because just like you, I was in the same situation, right? And I know a million other guys are in the same situation. It's like, where the hell do I start? Like, okay,
No
I'm
idea.
going to the VA. I'm seeing this mediocre therapist.
Yeah.
The guy that I'm looking at, is supposed to be helping me.
He just wants to give you a Xanax and send you on your way.
He looks like he's getting PTSD from hearing my PTSD shit, right? I'm like, how are you supposed to help me? And that's
There,
when I
there
got
was
hooked up with my
there was one
therapist.
day I had two separate docs for my CPT just because the VA is bullshit. They're
Yeah,
constantly retasking. They're constantly sending docs out on details and stuff, and they become you can't get a hold of them. You just they're gone. So I started with this one woman. She was great, and then she got detailed out, so she's gone now. So I had to start over with this other guy. And I remember this guy asked me. He asked me about how I felt about the withdrawal from Afghanistan. And I was like, well, if you really want to go down here, okay, we got time.
yeah.
So I rolled through it, and he literally did this. He leaned forward. He was like, "That's fucking deep," and then sat back and just went,
Like, hey, bro, you're supposed to help
"Like,
me.
what?
You're not supposed to.
Like, what the
Like,
fuck,
what's
man?"
going on? See, and that's the biggest thing. It's like, I think a big issue is guys in your situation, my situation, what we experience in the service is we get the bare minimum. And again, nothing against those therapists and all that stuff
They're
that's
trying.
contracted out, right? But
Yeah.
like you said, they get rotated all the time. There's no like um, baseline, and that was like
Yeah.
my biggest thing. That's why I stopped for a while. Because I didn't want to like, oh, hey, I'm moving on to a different assignment. Like, you're gonna meet with this person. I was like, cool. Now I have to freaking talk about 18 years of trauma
Mm-hmm.
again after I thought it was
Yeah.
here. I thought it was leveled out. Now I got to go back down here, and
Yep.
hopefully that's how cameras work. Hopefully I get back up there, right?
Before they get rotated somewhere else.
Exactly, and it's so important when you find the right person. And I'm glad you said that, and you find the right method
Well,
of
that's just it, though,
treating.
right? It's not for everybody.
So yeah, and exactly, and it's like
I tried the equestrian therapy. I tried the boating, and the equestrian was good. That did something very different for me. That helped me ground myself, and that actually helped me get in touch with my feelings. Because there's no there's no riding, there's no horseback riding, there's none of that. I would There's this place for you can pass on to anyone in the area in Mount Kisco, New York. It's called Endeavor Farms or Endeavor Therapeutic Horsemanship, and they have a veteran program
nice.
detailed specifically for veterans. And what you do is you do like a little intake, and you have the little chats. This is who I am. This is what I deal with, and they pair you up with a horse, and you spend your sessions with the horse. They bring the horse out, and they hook him up to the leads in the stall, and you sit there and you just brush the horse, you just pet the horse, you just get in sync with the horse, because horses, I learned, are some of the most emotionally sensitive animals on the planet. And if you're afraid, they're afraid. If you're anxious, they're anxious. If you're calm, they're calm. And I had two horses. This first one, Coda, this majestic, beautiful creature, huge. He had the dog shit abused out of him in like Missouri or something, and was beaten, was like burned, stabbed, cut, like horrible. And he was rescued and he was brought up here. And when I met him, he and I looked at each other, and I was like, "It's me."
Yeah.
And he looked at me and he was like, "Go fuck yourself."
So it's funny. I use this as a reference all the time. I would say it's because I have kids. I watch like Toy Story and stuff, but I'm
Yeah.
my own child. But what is it? The Spoon and Woody is like, oh, you're trash, just like me. I'm like, yep, nailed it. There it is. But it again, you brought up a very good point, and it's something I'm working on here in Connecticut with a nonprofit is equestrian therapy, because
Yeah.
much like us, those horses would have been put down because they no longer belong in society. And those horses
Yep.
are there at some kind of therapeutic camp to help someone else out.
Right.
And you make that connection. And I vetted a lot of guys before I even started looking into doing this, and they're like, yeah, that helps. That
It
helps being
does.
connected to such an animal like a horse. Like you nailed it. Like they're very sensitive. They're
Oh,
very,
beyond.
yeah. And yeah, I'm glad I'm doing this because it's like everything's like firing right now, right? And everything you're saying is just like I'm not the only one. He's not the only one. Hopefully,
No.
whoever is listening right now, you realize you're not the only one.
And you hate to say it too, but it's like you're in a unique position where you can do a lot of things and you can have some fun with it. you know so it's funny because as much as you're trying to create that outreach for other veterans, first responders, whatever, it's like this has got to be good for you, like to step back and be like, wow, I'm doing this is really good, I feel good. Oh no, I gotta go vet a horse farm. Oh, poor me, I'm gonna go spend a day on the ranch. Oh, that's gonna be hard.
No, yeah, and so and that it's funny, because I keep thinking back, and I'm just like, you know what, I'm doing. And I talked to one of my docs. He runs a nonprofit up in Maine Veteran Project. Super cool dude, like war hero. Did a lot
Yep.
of overseas stuff once he got out and retired. And all he wants to do is help. And
Yeah.
I leaned on him when I first had this concept of the nonprofit. I'm like, listen, like everything that I've written down, it seems like I'm doing it for me. It seems very
Yeah.
selfish. Like, oh, like I felt more at peace around a campfire with my boys. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna do a weekend retreat,
Yeah.
campfire with the boys.
Exactly.
And
Because if it's good for
he
you,
said something to
it's
me
going to
that
be good for other guys.
yeah, and he said something that stuck with me. He's like, "Hey, like you're not the only one that feels that way. You're just the one that's stepping up and being like, hey, like I'm gonna do the due diligence so that way we can all get back to that sense of belonging when we were in the service, even though we were getting pissed on in cahoots or
Oh yeah.
whatever. At least we were all
Oh,
under the
yeah.
same
You're all there
poncho,
together.
just hoping a centipede doesn't bite us in the freaking ass or whatever, right? Um, yeah, and it's mind-boggling to me that, and I know it's a society thing and all that stuff, but like there's so many people that talk and talk and talk like, oh, I want to help, I want to help. It's like fucking help, bro.
Yeah, do something.
You know?
Put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah, and
Go
it always
volunteer
catches me
somewhere.
off guard. It's just like whenever people would like compliment me or say, hey, you're doing such a good job and all that stuff, I was like, I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it because no one else is fucking doing it.
Right.
I'm not doing it so I can hear you say, hey, thank you, that's real brave, blah blah blah, whatever words they use. I'm like, not doing it for me. I'm doing it to for other guys, for guys that like they are so stubborn. And going back to what you said earlier about being
Oh yeah.
Marines, right? Like
Especially.
we're the worst. We're the freaking worst at it, right? I remember my first enlist, like first 4 years, right? When I got back from Iraq, we partnered with like a army like um, engineer unit or whatever, and we got close with a few of the guys. And one of the guys, he's like, "Oh, like I'm seeing a therapist and all that stuff," and I was like, "Fucking nerd! Like what?"
Pussy.
Um, and I, much like you, when I had my son, that's when it kind of hit me. I was like, "Oh, okay, like
Yep.
I'm responsible for a tiny human." Before I was responsible for a bunch of delinquents my age, older than
Oh
me,
yeah.
younger than me, and all that stuff. Like we're all over here. We all have the same thing in mind. Like come back with your shield on it type deal.
Yep.
Now it's like I got to get better. I have to get better because I don't want to. And this is a whole other episode. Pass on generational trauma to
Ah,
my kids. And
that's a
you're
good one.
invited to that one because you and I, we have, along with the single dad club. Um,
You got to make that one a watch party.
yeah, Yeah, but you know what? I'm so glad that you're my first guest and all that stuff, because this definitely went a different direction than I thought it was gonna go. And you saw my text message. I'm trying to structure this and
Oh,
structure
that
that
was great.
and all
That
that stuff.
was
And,
one, two,
and
three, four.
yeah, and I absolutely loved the way this turned out and what we were able to talk about, what we learned about you and your immense progress, just being who you are today as opposed to who you were back in the day and not even realizing it.
And then
Like,
who
oh,
I do
that's fucking
today.
normal. It's
Yeah.
normal. You're right. And now it's just like you're a family man, you got two kids, you got a wife that supports you with it's so huge. That's so rare,
No,
as you know a little
and I
bit about my
recognize that too.
backstory.
Like
It's
I
rare.
recognize how fortunate I am.
Yeah.
Like not, I look around and I know a lot of my coworkers are married, a lot of this, and I was on the phone earlier with one of the other medics, and we were talking about something, and he was like, "Oh, what are you doing, man?" And I'm like, "No, just folding some laundry, some domestic chores." And "Oh, isn't that why you got married? So you didn't have to do that anymore?" "Well," he goes, "I guess if you want it done right, do it yourself, right?" He goes, "The fucking point." And he just started going off about his wife, and I'm like, "Geez," I'm like, "Wow, okay," because my wife and I here, like, we were able to realize very early on that it's the two of us. It's, yeah, I do the yard work and, things like that. And she does the sewing and things like that. But if she comes home on a day and she's got 20%, well, I got to muster up with the 80 and vice versa. It's so I'm not a fool to sit here and not realize how lucky I am. I was a single dad with two kids who was in a real bad place, and this woman found me. And a little creepy how she went about getting a hold of me and stalking me on Instagram, and sent me a message drunk down in Florida, and then got embarrassed. So then she blocked me.
Oh,
Thinking,
she slipped into your DMs?
oh yeah,
Oh,
oh yeah.
I didn't know that.
Well, actually, no. So she followed me, right?
Uh-huh.
And so I was up there. She creeped my name on my badge, and she followed me. And when she followed me, I sent her a message. I'm like, hey, you look really familiar. Just wondering how we know each other. Didn't hear from her for like 3-4 days, 5 days, whatever it was. And she told me this story. She's down in Florida at her grandfather's condo with her uncle, and they're sitting on the balcony drunk. And she responds to me, and she's like, well, I've seen you around the hospital picking up patients, and I think you're really hot. And I immediately saw it and immediately replied. But I guess in her frame of mind, she had thought that if she blocks me right away, that I wouldn't see the message.
Oh boy.
So she blocked me. And then I saw her like a week later at the hospital. And that's coming up on 4 years ago. That was
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love
November
hearing stuff
19.
like that, man. Yeah.
So I've been very, very fortunate to get to where I am, despite all of the hurdles thrown in my way by douchebag E8s and, glory hungry officers, and just the brutality that is the civilian world. Like, I dare you to go back to your office and call someone gay. Like,
Dude.
see what happens.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God. So, man, this has been great, dude.
Absolutely. I do appreciate you taking the time out. I know busy dad and all that
time's
stuff.
always there for
Same.
this.
As far as what we talked about today, I'm glad you said what you said. I'm hoping that what you said today reaches someone in your field, or just another Marine, or another single dad that has custody of their fucking kids, right? Because it's so important. This is why I'm doing it. This is why we do it, right? And I definitely look forward to reconnecting with you again on a podcast. We got to get together.
Absolutely.
We're like 45 minutes away from each other.
Yeah, that's the worst part. And I've seen you once in the last 3 years.
Maybe. Yeah.
Maybe. We'll go with
Yeah.
one.
That's nuts, man. So
Blew off my wedding, you piece of shit.
I'll talk to you offline about that one.
I just remember sitting there with Soto, and he was like, "Yo, where's France?" I'm like, "Oh, we go and talk about France."
Yeah. So long story short, I just got back from my little retirement road trip, right? I cut it a week early, headed back, because I couldn't freaking move.
Ooh,
That road trip humbled the hell out of me. It's like, hey, your back is actually as messed up as everyone's telling you it is.
yeah,
So
surprise.
I cut the road trip early by a week, came home, relaxing. Was like, I gotta make it to his wedding and all that stuff. I want to see the boys. And then like, what was it, like 2-3 days prior, I was like, hey man, because like I still couldn't move. I was literally on my freaking couch, and I was like I have this little wheelie chair thing. It's super
Nice.
embarrassing to talk about.
I love
And I wheelie chair myself around the house
it. Gotta
whenever
walk.
I'm having like a back day. I feel like I need one of those easy chairs that go up the
Up the
stairs.
stairs.
Yeah,
Those are good.
yeah, but yeah, I'm way too young for that shit. Maybe I don't know. Yeah.
Your body's it's not the years, honey. It's the mileage.
Oh, absolutely. All right. So as far as what happens next is I'll be doing some more podcasts. I'll be having some more guests on with different backgrounds and all that stuff from the service transition over to different first responders type
Oh yeah.
roles. And my goal is to just have everyone on, and we just have like this giant like Zoom type meeting, and we're all just like the Brady Bunch, like looking up and this and that and
You're
whatever.
gonna need a
And
studio.
yeah, so yeah, that's the goal. And as again, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day and sitting here and bullshitting with me for almost an hour and a half.
Ah, it's been great, man.
It's been awesome. It's been
Been
awesome.
great.
But
You can't replace these moments for anything.
no, absolutely not.
So
Yeah, so I do have to do my little sign off. I feel fucking dirty doing this, because I gotta give
you gotta promote the merch.
nonprofit
You
a
gotta
shout
promote the
out.
website.
Atlas Rising Initiative, atlasrising.org is our website for more information. Merch link is on the website. Podcast will be published every Thursday, so this will actually be published tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern time, because that's important. I learned that a few weeks ago. But yeah,
Time.
yeah, Alex, it's always a pleasure catching up with you and all that stuff. Thank you so much for being here and
Anytime,
sharing your story.
anytime.
All right. Hey, as always, you're not allowed to quit, and reach out.